It's here, the Vivo X200 Pro. And you know what, this time around, weirdly enough, I'm more excited to talk about the performance of the Dimensity 9400 inside this phone and not the cameras. See, generally Vivo phones are excellent with cameras, and that's going to be true about the X200 Pro as well, but the company has made some curious decisions with this phone, especially on the camera front, which I'm going to be discussing in this first impressions video of the X200 Pro, a unit that we've actually imported from China, and the global launch will happen a couple of months later. Alright, let's begin. If you're here for the first time, I'm Arshad, you're watching Track and Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Now, since I'm excited to talk about the Dimensity 9400, let's start with that. As you can see, this is the core architecture of the Dimensity 9400 on your screen right now, and it consists of all performance cores, mind you. But as you can tell, the Dimensity 9400 has lower clock speeds, at least for the Prime core, compared to the A18 Pro and the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is possibly the reason why it doesn't reach the kind of Geekbench single-core or multi-core scores that the other two processors do. Now, in Antutu, we noticed that this phone wasn't touching 3 million like we saw on a bunch of leaked screenshots, but it could also be because we're using the base 12GB 256GB variant of the phone. Because the highest end variant with 16GB of RAM and 1TB of storage can actually reach higher, as we saw in GSM Arena's review. But you know what? The Dimensity 9400 kills with the GPU performance. The Immortalis GPU inside this phone is an absolute beast. We noticed that the GPU subscore in Antutu was actually higher than the Snapdragon 8 Elite subscore. In fact, the ray tracing performance has been improved by leaps and bounds as well. We actually got an average FPS of 42 in the Solar Bay test, which is definitely much higher than what the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or the Dimensity 9300 managed, but of course, which is going to be the case. But I think that it can also go toe-to-toe or probably even beat the Snapdragon 8 Elite when it launches. We'll have to wait and watch. Oh, by the way, when I was testing the phone, thermal efficiency was very good too. The phone didn't get hot. Good job, Vivo and MediaTek. If you guys haven't tried it out already, there's this game called Arena Breakout, which is based on the Unreal Engine, and it's a fantastic looking game, and that runs at Ultra HD and 120 FPS on this phone. Plus, you get support for ray tracing as well. It looks gorgeous. But where the Dimensity 9400 actually suffers is in sustained performance, which is something that I was actually expecting. So in CPU throttle, we got a CPU stability score of about 64%, which is not too bad, but it's not great either. And the GPU stability in the 3D Mark wildlife stress test that we ran, well, that was really low. It came down to 48.1%. The frame rates did drop. But what's interesting to note is that the battery percentage dropped only 5%. Now, this performance is definitely better than every single Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 phone we've tested, and I have a very strong feeling that the X200 Pro is going to be a battery beast. Also, because you get a 6000 mAh battery inside this phone. Yes, that's been upgraded from the X100 Pro. And that's a single cell silicon carbide battery. Yeah, this thing's gonna last for at least a day and a half of like moderate to intense usage. Now that we're talking about battery, the charging speeds on this phone, at least the Chinese variant, is 90 watts, but it could be 120 watt when it launches in India, and you get wireless charging support as well. Talking about charging, you can charge us up by hitting that subscribe button. We're trying to hit 1 million soon. All your support is appreciated. Alright, now talking about the cameras on the X200 Pro, the biggest advantage on this phone is the fact that Vivo has ported over the X100 Ultra's 3.7x 200MP telephoto camera over to this one. So for a telephoto, it's a massive 200MP sensor. It's a 1 by 1.4 inch sensor, and it takes excellent photos, especially zoom photos, not just at 85mm, which is the organic crop of it, even further ahead at artificial zoom levels up to 200mm, it takes good photos. In fact, while testing, I was constantly using the 3.7x or the 85mm just to punch into pictures and get that beautiful bokeh drop off. In fact, if you do that, you don't even need the portrait mode to create like a depth effect. Talking about which, the portrait mode continues to be excellent even on the X200 Pro. Of course, you get like a bunch of focal lengths from 23mm up to 135mm. That's not it, there are a bunch of Zeiss portrait lenses and all of them look fantastic. One thing I was really surprised by is the fact that despite being a Chinese variant of the phone, the skin tones, especially in the Zeiss Natural Color mode, were pretty neutral or close to neutral at least. Now coming back to that 3.7x telephoto camera, you get a focusing distance of up to 14 cm, which means that you can actually take great tele macro shots with it, not just at 3.7x, at 7.4x and even at 10x. And of course, the samples, you can take a look at them. They are absolutely gorgeous. Now the other good thing is that this time you can shoot 4K 60 FPS Dolby Vision videos using all the cameras. Yes, that includes the primary, the telephoto, the ultrawide, and even the selfie camera. Plus, you get the option to shoot at 4K 120 FPS using the primary camera. But you know what? This is where the praise for the Vivo X200 Pro's camera sort of wanes off, primarily because the selfie camera performance was alright. It wasn't as good as I expected it to be. And more importantly, the ultrawide is a Samsung JN1 sensor. It's not bad. I mean, it still takes good ultrawide photos, but it's not the best for sure. But finally, and most importantly, the primary camera sensor has been downgraded. It's not a 1-inch sensor anymore. It's the new LYT-818, which is a 1 by 1.28 inch sensor. Now, Vivo claims that they've used the best algorithm to bring the detail levels as close as that of a 1-inch sensor, but in reality, there is a certain bit of over sharpening that I noticed with the primary camera, and that is going to happen, right? I mean, a physical sensor will always capture natural details, which computational photography may not be able to match at that level. But overall, these are just my first impressions of the X200 Pro's cameras, and this is just the Chinese variant. So don't take my word for it. This is not my final review. Maybe things will change by the time we get the Indian unit. Let's wait and watch, fingers crossed. Alright, now finally let's talk about the design of the phone. From the back, at least when you look at it head on, it looks very similar to the Vivo X100 Pro with that massive circular camera cutout. But the change in the industrial design is that it is boxier now. So the aluminum mid-frame right now has a lot more, gripping space, so you can hold it very comfortably and use it as well. And yeah, on the front, gone is that curved display. What you get now is a micro quad curved display, which is like a good balance between a flat panel and an entirely curved one. And I kind of like it. Of course, Xiaomi was the first one to introduce it. A lot of the flagships this year, the Chinese flagships especially, like the Vivo X200 Pro, the OnePlus 13, the Oppo Find X8 Pro, all of them will be using a micro quad curved panel. Now, when I held it in my hand for the first time, I felt like the in-hand feel was better than the X100 Pro, and that's when I realized that this phone is actually slimmer than the X100 Pro. But the weight is nearly identical on both. So what Vivo's managed to do just by replacing that 1-inch sensor with a smaller sensor is made the phone slimmer and found space for a larger battery. Well, I think that's a compromise that I would take. Oh yeah, and by the way, for the very first time on a Vivo flagship, we get IP69 rating. And no, I'm not gonna make a 69 joke because it's pretty stale now. Oh, by the way, that micro quad curved OLED panel that I was talking about is a fantastically tuned panel. It's a massive display. It's a 6.78 inch display, and it has a refresh rate of 120 Hz plus LTPO, which can go down to as low as 0.1 Hz. Also, the peak brightness on this thing is 4500 nits, which seems crazy until you take a look at the Realme GT7 Pro specs, and that thing apparently reaches 6000 nits. Honestly, I don't understand what is this battle between getting to that highest nits number when it'll be only for a 1% window. What's even the point? You won't be able to see it as well. It's just metrics. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is can the display get bright enough outdoors, and well, the X200 Pro can. Also, interestingly, when we were testing this phone, we noticed that you get support for HDR10 and Dolby Vision on Netflix as well, which is surprising primarily because most Chinese phones we've tested do not come with DV support out of the box, but the X200 Pro is an outlier. Now, to round up the whole multimedia experience, you get stereo speakers. They're pretty loud, they're rich, the clarity is also very good. Of course, you also get support for every single Bluetooth high-res codec that you can think of. And yes, you also do get support for, high-res audio wired. But one thing I noticed during testing is that the haptic feedback on this X200 Pro is not that great. It's average at best, and I think that OnePlus, Oppo, Google, and to a certain extent even Samsung do it better. As for the rest of the stuff, you get Bluetooth 5.4, you get Wi-Fi 7, you get support for NFC, and you also do get USB Gen 3.2 port. Hallelujah. Now coming to the software experience, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. On the X200 Pro in China, you get Origin OS, which is something that you all are already aware of, and when it comes to India, it will come with FunTouch OS 15 based on Android 15. Now if you want to know how FunTouch OS 15 will look on this phone, well, we have a very nice detailed guide of FunTouch OS 15 for you. If you haven't watched it yet, go check it out. Now, if you ask me, the X200 Pro to me felt like a legit upgrade to the X100 Pro, but there are certain decisions that Vivo has made which might not sit down well with the fans. For example, like I mentioned, the fact that, the primary camera sensor has been downgraded. But this is a phone after all, and brands will find as many ways as possible to make them handy, comfortable to use despite using a massive display. And of course, they will use all sorts of computational photography trickery to ensure that you don't miss out on the kind of quality of pictures that you're expecting. And if you ask me, Vivo's algorithm is already capable of doing that. It's one of the best algorithms in the industry right now. So yeah, I mean, maybe the next generation will be even better. And for the Dimensity 9400 inside the phone, it may not be a beastly performer, but it's very powerful and very balanced as well. Of course, it doesn't beat the A18 Pro or even the upcoming Snapdragon 8 Elite. Alright, that's it from me for this one. I can't wait for the Indian variant to come so I can test it out in detail. Alright, so what do you guys think of the X200 Pro? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.